Good evening, everyone. Let's call our Finance and Audit Committee meeting to order at 6:05. And if we could have roll call, please.
John Chamberlain.
Here.
Stephen Martino.
Here.
Joanne Roberts.
Here.
Steve Cooley.
Here.
Richard Beneke. John Hallowell.
Here.
Vice Chair Ray Santos.
Here. Just kidding. Sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize.
June?
Chair Elaine Morgan.
Here.
Sharon Geiser.
Here.
Councilmember Laura.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Carroll.
Here.
That's everybody.
Okay, we have an excused absence this evening. Richard Beneke is out of town. And thank you. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, is there any adjustments to the agenda for this evening? Everybody here. Any conflicts of interest disclosures? And we're going to open public comment at 6:07 and close it at 6:07. We have no public speakers this evening. So we'll go to action item number 2, the adoption of the minutes. I have a couple of corrections. They're minor. I think Nancy could probably approve it with the minor corrections. Mm-hmm. We can do that, yeah. Right?
Just bring up what they are.
Okay. All right. So the only thing I really saw is that under the call to order roll call, there's a note after Mr. Beneke's name that all were present, and we need to correct that because we did have 3 absences. And the other thing I thought that might be a benefit was number 6, to actually list the 2 members that resigned. And the only other item I saw is that we had included Jennifer Burnett in the list of members as they were voting, but we did not include Diana, so I thought, well, we should either remove Jennifer or add Diana. One of the two, right? Was there any other corrections?
Madam Chairman, as a point of clarification, you said there were some people that were not and some people that were, but for the minutes, has the secretary been told who those people are, so at least she knows who they are?
Yes.
No, I don't.
No, I can find it. Nicole, I'm sorry. Nicole knows.
They're listed in the excused absence area, the 3, which is myself, Diana, and Jennifer. Okay.
I make a motion to accept the minutes with those changes, those 3 changes that were mentioned.
I'll second.
Everybody in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Anybody opposed? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to number 3 in our packet of information that Milana was kind enough to copy for us. Milana, you have the floor.
Okay, well, we have gone through the checklist and tried to come up with a document through the committee, which isn't complete, but what I thought I'd do is I'd just start with the SEO report itself. And so what I... So what I started with, and you'll see it, it's the very first page, is this, the little squares. This is a summary of the findings that the State Controller's Office had when they were here at the city doing their investigative internal control audit, when they were here that summer.
Alana, can you show us that page one more time?
Should be the first one, right after the staff report.
This one here.
Okay, got it.
Was hiding on the, yes.
Got it.
So what I did is I just listed each one of the findings that they had, what it was, and what we've done about it. If you look at the report itself, which those pages are also attached, you'll see that when they issued their report, one of the things that they would do with anyone is they give you a draft of their findings and they ask you to return comment to them. So the comments we had at that time are printed in the report as well. So you can always refer to some of the stuff that was already included in their formal report. Since they allow you to read their drafted comments, you have the discussion, you write your responses to them, and they're included in the final report, there's no further communication you have with the State Controller's Office. That's all that they require. So that's been done. But as a matter of ongoing internal controls of the city and getting things in order, I've listed them here and then let you know on comments whether it was something that was corrected, which we can discuss if there's one in particular you want to talk about, and the ones that are not at this time still corrected and what the target is. So there are a few of them that are like gray boxes. That's because the finding was very generalized, and then below their finding they had what I would call sub-findings. So I labeled them 1A, 1B, so that you could see what they were, because each one does have to be taken into account and they don't necessarily have the same answer. So I wanted to separate them at least a little bit. So with these findings that they had, we only have a few that have not been corrected at this time, very few. The first is the accounting for fixed assets and inventory. The city has maintained fixed asset schedules for their enterprise funds. That was requirement, and they followed that. So for the sewer and for the transit funds, the fixed assets were always recorded and maintained. However, they never complied with the rest of GASB 34, which is to account for all of the infrastructure and assets of the city itself. So that is not done at this time. However, we went out to RFP. We got a contractor. They've come in. They have done the initial inventory of the IT assets and the furniture and fixtures and vehicles. Things have been tagged, they've been photographed, they have a preliminary list. They're now working on the streets so that they can do the evaluation of the streets and do grading, which I won't say that I understand this, but they go through each street in compartmental pieces and they grade it as to whether it's in good shape, not in good shape, horrible shape, needs to be repaired. You know, they do this grading, which then of course helps you identify what would the value of that stretch of the road be. So we're getting there, we're making progress on that whole project, and we're hoping to have our report from them with our valuation so that we can record the asset values sometime August, September. That's if we stay on target. As you know, Public Works has to work with me hand in hand on this because there are things I just don't know. I don't have enough technical knowledge about infrastructure assets. And because we're trying to do a lot of things all at once and there's projects started, and so they're a little tight on time, but we are doing our best to make sure we get people who can help answer questions so they can continue the process so we don't stay stuck. It may just extend the time a little bit, but we're still hoping to have it all done before the end of September. Yes.
Alana, when they finish that, you know, the tally as far as the asset goes, will that also give us a life expectancy for those assets as it goes along, or are they simply just accounting for the assets themselves?
For the infrastructure, I am since they're grading it based on condition, I'm thinking in my mind that that will give us a life, an estimated life, remaining life of those assets. For other things like chairs and computers, servers, and all that, that really is going to be something we need to look at to say, okay, these are what we have, their range in life is this to this. We need to now put in our replacement program, which is something we want to do too. We need to make sure we identify the oldest things that need to be replaced and then keep constantly moving that, especially with anything related to IT. The technology changes so quickly. You have to make sure that everything is currently being turned over. You can't do it all at once. There's simply too much. So we need to, once we have that list, then we can identify what we want to do and how we can do those replacements.
And at that time, you'll be able to just continuously keep up with that and bring it in as the items come in and go out with.
Right, and we'll know what they are because they've been tagged. I don't know if you can see on this screen, there's a little orange dot up here on the top.
Okay.
That means that they counted it. So things that have little orange dots. So if you look at the backs of the computers, when you see the little orange dot,
I see them, yeah.
yeah, that's how they knew when they came through and they had a whole team. They just swarmed and they did all that. And so those little orange stickers was so they wouldn't accidentally count something twice, a different member of the team come in and do it again. So the little orange stickers are for that. And then we'll have all the information. We'll know, how old it is, what the model or serial number is. We'll be able to identify that kind of thing and get things handled.
Do they barcode the?
Yes.
They do?
They do. That's why I was looking and I'm wondering where the barcode is.
Okay, good.
I know in my office, my tower got a barcode and an orange sticker, so it has
Very
both.
good.
I just don't know where this one's at, but
Okay.
they should have both.
Question.
Yes,
You've mentioned the hard assets, the fixed assets, and the streets.
yes.
Is this RFP also include identifying and valuing the properties, parks, buildings?
Yes, all infrastructure of the city.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have to get a handle on everything that the city has now under its umbrella for maintenance. And it all has a life. I mean, land has a perpetuity, you would think, but you still need to make sure you've got your land improvements, all of your sidewalks. We have gutters, we have storm drains, we have everything you can think of. We have a lot we have to account for. Light fixtures, there's just the signals, there's so many things that they have to look at. And so I expect it'll take them a little while, but they were an excellent company with lots of really good references. They're a national firm, so they do this all the time, and that was one of the reasons we had selected them. So.
And for IT, the software is also being included as an asset?
It depends. If we own the software, then yes, but in a lot of cases we don't. We just have user licensing agreements. That is not an asset.
Okay.
Really?
Yes.
Well,
Because I would assume that well, in fact, I know that license has a value.
right, but usually it also has a very finite life. So if it has a 1-year life, it's not an asset because it has to be renewed. So
Okay.
it depends on the
So there's
software.
a time frame.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, okay,
Good.
that's correct.
Right. So we have to look at each one. I mean, some softwares, yes, we do have them, and they're on our servers, and we have use of it. But there are others that we don't. So we just have to evaluate those one at a time. I know you're thinking.
I am. I'm thinking of whether, if we have things like where we lease cell tower access and things like that on the building or whatever, those are included also?
No, those aren't an asset. If I mean, our building, it's our property. If the antenna was our property,
Okay.
then we would have that.
All right.
But otherwise, it's a rental agreement, a lease agreement, where we have revenues then that we expect
Okay.
on
All
whatever
right.
that basis is.
Because on that is revenue is coming from the land.
Right.
probably,
Yeah.
From the
Alright.
use of our equipment,
Yeah,
or
because
stationary
we don't do
equipment.
any maintenance of that.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there somebody identifying those leases?
Yes. That was done almost right away when our new consultants had joined the city in order to determine the sources of cash flows
Thank
to
you.
try and identify what was happening with the city. So those were identified pretty early on.
May I ask, has this ever historically been captured or done?
No.
Okay, and what is the time frame for updating it? We're going to do it now
Do it now, and then it will be continuous.
on an annual basis, on a semi or
On a
biannual,
as
or-
it happens basis.
As it happens.
As it
Well,
happens.
I'm just trying to
Oh, yeah.
clarify.
Oh, yeah, we're not doing that again. One of the software packages that we got for accounting, it includes a project accounting module, if you will. So we're able to capture, even now, we're capturing by large projects. And then I also have set up capital funds within the new software so that we can start identifying, hey, we paid for this, it's an asset. Okay, so now I'm going to do a transfer, put it in the asset, and I'm going to start capturing those right away.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Much easier as you go than to try and figure it out after the fact. And the same goes with replacements, because if you don't identify what it was that you've replaced right away, then you end up with things on that list that you really don't have anymore.
Exactly.
So the other things on here that are, they have little numbers. The first one, the number 1, the administrative policies and procedures, we have some general ones that have been brought in and everyone has approved them. This committee and city council, they're in place. We're working on some that are much more specific, especially now that we have our new software and we're putting a lot more structure in place. So we're still working on that. It'll be a continual process, but I'm hoping to get that first grouping of all of the more specific procedures done this fall so that we have something we can follow and share.
Which item are you on?
That is number 6.
Oh, the footnote. Okay,
Right, my little footnotes.
Okay.
9A were the bank reconciliations. Since that time, we've kind of back and forth and back and forth. All the accounts have stayed reconciled on a monthly basis, the exception being the big account, the general account, the pooled cash account. That one is large and quite difficult. So we get caught up, then we get behind, then we get caught up and we get behind. Then we got our new software and it wouldn't work right. So now we have gone in and I spent a lot of time with the software guys. We got it to work. I did a reconciliation of every single day of December. So I have one bank reconciliation every day of December. And then in January, I changed it up and we made it weekly. We're now doing all the bank recs weekly. We are now reconciling in mid-May. On Friday, it was April the 26th was the one that was done. As of right now today, we're in the middle of May on the bank reconciliations. And now our bank reconciliation process has caught up with our cash receipt posting, which we're also working on getting caught up now that that process is integrated. We now have to evaluate all these electronic files that come in. So we've been struggling, but we're catching up on those too. We will get to a point, the goal is by the end of this month, which is Friday, that both of them are caught up so that we're consistently, every day, cash receipts are posted from the day before, we've evaluated it, and then every Thursday, we're gonna do the bank reconciliation for the week. And that's what our process is going to be. And then the rest of the accounts will still be monthly because they don't have that kind of activity.
That's wonderful.
That's a really big.
That one's been
That's-
an uphill
that is a
battle.
really
but
big
we are
deal.
finally right there.
That's huge.
Then item number 10. This one has bothered me more than any of the others. With our change to the software that we have now, trying to get everything aligned in the right place so that it gets reported correctly. I haven't been able to prepare a financial report overall for city council or for this committee because I didn't want to give you something I already knew was wrong. That doesn't help. I am so close to having everything in the right place and segregating all the funds that need to be segregated. Now I'm just doing little tweaks on it that in July I should be able to issue my first set of financials that will then go to council and this committee on a monthly basis.
Okay, great.
And then the goal will be that we have each month closed by the third week of the following month. If we can keep everything else in line, we should be all right on that. So,
Are you be including the fiscal year in here, this month of July?
no, I think I'll have May, and then we'll see about June. June is always tough anyway, but I'm hoping to get a good draft with all the accruals, because that'll be the hard part. I'm hoping to get a good draft of the June 30 year end by like the first week of September. That's my hope. Only because we need 60 days of cash receipts based on government standards to do the receivables. It's not like the regular business accounting. Government is, what did you get in the first 60 days after year end? And that's what you pick up and accrue. So I almost have to wait just to see what comes through the door. But that's my goal. That's my goal.
Milana?
Yes.
One of the areas where we were missing timeliness on information was the past relationship that we had with Union Bank, and we replaced that trustee relationship with Wilmington Trust.
Yes.
How is that going, and can you speak to reporting?
I am trying to do the accounting for the investments from July 1 through March 31st, which is Union. I'm real close to having that figured out. As soon as I have that all posted, I've already talked to our representative at Wilmington Trust, and because she knows that I'm struggling with all of the accounting for all the investment accounts, she ran the reports for me for April, for May, and for June, so that I will already have them so that I can do the postings monthly from them. And then she and I are going to work together on regular recurring reports where all I have to do is go click, that's the one, and I'll be able to actually enter our investment accounting and bond activity monthly, and we'll be able to see it.
Excellent.
That's good. That will be all segregated, right? I mean,
Yes, it will all be segregated. Painfully segregated.
We're going to have a party.
slow down a little bit.
That's
My brain is
excellent.
working right now, so.
Yes, the CFD accounting has been one of the more difficult areas.
Yeah.
And you that's actually what's all over my desk right now, because I'm reconciling what we've done so far in all of our CFD funds as far as assessments and consultant costs and all that for this fiscal year. So I'll have that cleaned up. But I have to segregate CFD into 4 different funds. It's
be
not
fun.
like it was before.
It'll
It's
be
now.
fun to see that.
Yes. So 4 funds. Every account has 33 sub-accounts because of each improvement area. So I get, after a while, I have to stop and shake my head and then
Yeah.
go back to
I
it.
saw your form. That's amazing.
Yes. So it's working out. It's just I have to stop and think. So if you get a report and see numbers coming in and then going out and then in and out and in and out, that's because I kept changing my mind and had to reverse what I did and then do something different and then say, nope, that wasn't it. Reverse it. That's something different. Till I land in the right place to make sure I got it all. So that's the tough part. But we're getting really close to it. So, the one thing that I did want to talk about was 9B, and that is the lack of segregation of duties. I have in here that we've corrected it. But you have to know with our segregation of duties, there's only so many things we can do with a limited staff. But we've done as much as we possibly can, and we're always open to suggestion of, well, maybe if you change and have this person do that and this person do that, then you segregate it better. And we're trying to find room for that. We work with the auditors with that on the suggestions. But for, say, cash receipts process, cash receipts come in at the desk from the customer service clerks. We have another clerk in finance who gets an electronic file, not the money, has to determine that it's in the right places and it matches the deposit slips that they now have. And then they post it. Different person then reconciles the bank to make sure that all the cash receipts, everything matches. So you don't want one person doing all of that.
Right.
There are only 3 of us, so we change where we can. Everything has to be approved, and I have the final say on approval. So we're trying to make sure that we separate our activities as much as we can. Right now, CFDs are, the accounting for the CFDs is pretty much all with me. It's not really anywhere else yet, but we haven't done a lot of activity with our CFD money. It's really just investment accounting. We have interest. We have transfer to make a debt payment, that kind of thing. So we don't have a lot of expenditures. So having those controls not be completely in place right now it's okay, but we will be putting those in place as we start using bond funds again too. So just know that that's also always changing. That one's a little tough to sometimes meet, especially if somebody goes on vacation, then that leaves you 2 people. So
Yeah, on your cash receipts, do you have any appeal on that? I mean, you reconcile that on appeal, or you just eliminate the appeal? A purchase order?
Oh, the purchase orders are on our purchasing side, on the disbursement side. So that are the director who's in charge of their department. If they have a purchase order, they initiate it through requisition process. It has an electronic approval process based on how much it is. All of them come through me. Once I've approved that, then it can roll into a purchase order and go to the vendor. Vendor has it. When they invoice, it has to match. If it doesn't, then we have a problem. We kick it back. They fix it. We can't cut checks until purchase orders have been issued. The system won't let us. We tried. It didn't work. So they have to be approved through the whole system and rolled through properly. We also tested it because there was no one here one day and we needed a purchase order for a department. So I entered it. And then I went to approve it because I approve all of them, and the system told me no. So we know it works.
Okay.
And it wasn't even a large dollar amount, but I had to, beg the city manager to approve it. So we know it's working. But the whole purchase order system, as we get everybody more comfortable with that, that's working really well.
I don't understand some of the policies and procedures, and I understand they're being written, but I'm a little bit confused after what you just said about 5B, missing invoices.
Yes.
And the response, this particular finding can always be an issue, but best practices and consistent application will minimize lost documentation. I can't see how it'll minimize, should totally eliminate it.
It should.
If you can't have an invoice without a PO, the
Right.
invoice gets back to the vendor and never paid.
Right. That means that the invoice existed, right? It got paid. We know it was here. It was coded. Everybody approved it. None go through without that. It never fails. The auditor comes in and says, I want these 35 invoices, and there's one. You
Okay.
cannot.
I misunderstood.
Yes.
I thought you were saying that you had an invoice and you didn't know
Right.
if it was paid or not.
When the
Okay.
state controller's office auditors came in, apparently they asked for a slew of invoices,
Yes.
and many of them could not be found.
Yes.
Whether accidental or otherwise, no one knows. But a lot of those were just not found.
Correct.
And so that's really what that was talking about.
Misunderstood it. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question. On item 6, we have made significant corrections, and I do note that your comment that they're refined continually. One of the things, if I remember reading through the auditor's report, now the state controllers and also MGO who came in just before the Macias, Guinea, and O'Connell was an auditing firm that we brought in before the state controller's office. I'm saying this for the new people, that we brought in before the state controller's office came in to do an audit review of our situation, because we knew that we needed eyes as fast as possible. And then the state controller's office came in on the heels of them. So some of the things that were kind of crossover on information was that we did not have policies in place for IT controls. If somebody left, we needed to have policies in place to remove them from the system. If somebody's job duties changed, we needed to be able to update so that they did or did not have access to some of the financial, things like that. IT is something that can be kind of embedded in this list.
Oh, yes.
So could you tell me what we're doing in that area? Because, we got two areas. You worry about things walking out the door financially in terms of a bucket of money or a bad invoice or whatever,
Right.
but you also have to worry about the IT side. So would you?
Right. I know that with IT, we have a consultant, a vendor that we've used for that process, and they have some staff, 1 or 2 people on site here to help us with that. They have the ability to initiate or turn off emails, user IDs, that kind of thing. They have a form that I'm just guessing is something that was developed after this happened that I know I've had to fill out so that someone could have access or get a new email address as staff has changed or what have you. So they have a control on who uses what their username is, not their password, because you don't want them knowing the passwords, but they have the ability to reset it so they could remove someone's ability to log on. With our new accounting software, that person is me at the moment while we continually keep refining who has access to what, and then at some point, probably in the next couple of months, I'll be handing off that administrative control to IT so that they can then put it in with everything else that they control. It only makes sense to do that. So I know that they manage that. I know I've personally had to fill out the form so that they know who either needs to be turned off or who needs to be brought in. I've had temps come in to help, and they've had to have access to the accounting software, but I didn't allow them to have an email because they didn't need it. So there's that control as well, and IT was really, they were on top of that and made sure that it was right. So they have that process in place. So these were their specific findings in their report, where they have a lot of detail of what they found, what they thought needed to be done about it, and then what the city immediately responded with. And a lot of these things were handled immediately. And some of them were even being handled during the time of that audit as the staff had turned over and new people were coming in charge and looking at different things and thinking, why are we doing this? And so some things got fixed almost at the same time. But during the period under review, it was a problem, so that's why everything ended up in that report. The second part of the state controller's report has to do with just the internal controls of a company in general, of a city, of a county, of a corporation, partnership, small business, big business, doesn't matter. So they had, it's towards the back, but it was their appendix. So it looked like this, and there's many pages of it. But what I did, because as I've said, and I know this committee's heard me say it, they took their whole book and just turned it into a report. Yes, they did. So what I did was this little triangle that I put on this page, this is something that applies to all companies everywhere, every auditor. When we start to audit, we have to know this. As we audit, this is what we're auditing for. We need to make sure that these things are in place. And a lot of these things you cannot just document and be done. And that's why it's hard sometimes to get through internal controls. Sometimes it's not the procedure that's written. It's not to look that everyone initialed where they needed to. It's having that feeling that you know that they really followed the process, that people are really doing what they're supposed to do, that they're not just doing it just before you get here to make sure they've dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's. Because if they do it that way, then there was no point in the first place. So as an auditor, I took all of the things from their report, which is also just the handbook of how do you audit for internal controls, and I turned it into this several page but table so you can see how things fall together with this triangle that we follow. The first one, which is really hard to document, and it really is just a feeling you get. I don't know how else you can verify it, but integrity and ethical values. You can make people sign a statement of ethics. You can listen to them tell you how much integrity they have, but the proof's in the pudding, and so it's a feeling you get. It's from things that you look at where you just have to have that ability to know that things are okay. You ask a question, you get an answer. You need a document, you've got it. You look for this, you've got that. Why doesn't this work? This is what happens. Why isn't it here? Because that's not how it goes this way. This is how this, and you get explanations, and you can see that everyone's following along and everything's on an even keel. It's a feeling. It's not something you can just put your hands on. And a lot of these are like that. And that's why auditors do their auditing in the field, because they like to hear what people are saying, see what you're doing, get a feel for interactions between staff and management and what's happening. So a lot of these are hard to say you have something you can actually concrete, put your hand on. Commitment to competence, knowledge and skills, abilities, training, and counseling. The only concrete thing I can think of for that is knowing that you are hiring people who have the skill set required for that position. You test them for it. They go through multiple stages of interview, whatever that is. But I know that here at the city, we've put in place now testing. You have to be able to test into your position if it's so required. If they say you have to have this credential, then you have to have that credential, or we're tossing out the applications right away. So we are taking that seriously. We need people who know how to do what they need to do so they do it right. And then we stay with them, we monitor, we make sure that it's right, and we counsel if we need to. So I don't believe, although it's hard for me to say for sure, but I don't believe that that was happening at a high enough level in the past. I'm not sure what the SCO was looking at specifically when they looked at that, but I do know that it was a problem.
On A1 and A2,
Yes.
does the city have training that's provided on a regular, ongoing basis? I know the city's small, but every entity I've looked at before to document this has an ongoing program of ethics training. Does the city have that, and is it, or will it be enforced, i.e. once a quarter, once a year, whatever?
I believe that, well, we have to do sexual harassment training every year. I
Same
believe
type
the
thing.
ethical one is every year, or maybe one of them's every 2 years.
I think it's 2 years.
I know I had to do them last year and this year, and I don't know why I had to do it twice. But
Ethical is every 2 years. And it was just sent to me that and you all should be taking the ethics training also. There's an online course that you can take, and it's a 2-hour commitment to do it, and you will be asked to make sure that you do your ethics training.
I'm assuming it's retained in some type of
It is.
personnel file.
There's
should be
a-
documentable for the auditors next time around.
There's a certificate that you get, the city clerk keeps it.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I have to do ethics training because it's been 2 years, so I have to do mine, and I was sent a reminder by the city clerk. But there's also, if there's a need, we bring in the city attorney and get everybody in a room to do it then also.
Right.
So there's the two options for that.
Right, we're also, through our HR, we're also doing some once a month, once every other month. We have a service through our payroll processor. They have someone who can come in, and if we need them to focus on a particular thing, they can come in and do a discussion with staff. We've done one for, what did she call it? It was for supervision, how to make sure that you're following your supervision path and, you know, you don't get yourself into trouble, but you're still monitoring how your staff work. They came in and did one of those. And so there's different topics based on, you know, just kind of what you hear or what things they have available at different times. So we're starting to implement that as well, to where the directors, supervisors, anyone who manages other staff, if it applies to them, if it doesn't, if it's something someone else should maybe attend, then HR contacts them, makes it available, and usually has more than one time slot for it, because we do have some split shift people in the city as well. So we try to make that available to everyone.
Excellent.
Not all of them are required, but
Thank you.
yeah, try to stay on top of it. Sometimes it's a little tough. Our management philosophy and operating style, that's another one of those personal nature kinds of things, and it's another one where you can, the proof is in the pudding. What are they doing? Are they taking unnecessary risks with the city? Are they not staying on top of whatever it is that they should be doing? So you get a feel for if those things are in place or not. Todd is working on the organizational structure. He keeps refining it, how it should look, who should be in what positions. As we finish filling in staff in the next several years to get the city back to where it belongs, that structure will make more sense. And he's trying to manage that so that we stay as small as we can, but not so small that we can't run things efficiently. So that's another thing we're still working on. The assignment of authority same thing. As we get people in the positions that they need to be in, as we fill in some of the open spaces or the needs the city has, then those delegations and responsibilities will be made clear and will hold people accountable for what it is they're expected to do. All of that goes with human resources. Human resources has done a great job putting things together. There are job descriptions. We do have a safety manual. We have all kinds of things that have been issued to all of the managers and to the staff. HR will hold meetings for employees without the managers there so that there's no conflicts. If people want to say something, they can without feeling like, well, supervisor heard me, you know, kind of a thing. So she's really taken it seriously and is working to get that all squared away too, which is it's a change. It's a change that a lot of people, you know, would never say anything, and now they see it's much more open. So it's a good thing.
HR is on staff, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, HR is on staff, and then she has resources available to her to help, you know, hold it up together. Plus, in this last budget for next year, next week, she has a budget to get an assistant to help her stay up with all of the benefits and all of the paperwork that you cannot get away from in the HR. So she's finally going to get someone who can help her on some of that too. So. The next page is the risk assessment. You know, what do we do when we identify a risk? It depends on what the risk is. If there's a risk and Todd sees it and says, this is a risk that involves community service in the police department, he will bring in those two directors. They will sit, they will talk about, this is what I've heard, what's the reality, what should we do, what should we expect, what should we be prepared for, do we need people, do we need to set up this or that. I know that they do that with the Cherry Festival. That's just, it's not like one of those, risk, but you know that it's going to involve our community services people. It's going to involve the PD. They need to be ready to respond if they need to. And so those risks are all evaluated from the city manager in the same way. You start with, is it a risk we need to talk about? Who should be involved? What do we need to put in place? What should we expect? And he's been really good at identifying those. And sometimes it's hard to remember that he started last October. But he already, I mean, he hasn't even been through a whole year yet, but he seems to be right on top of all these issues. He sees them coming. He makes sure that he stays with everybody. So, the control activities, those are our policies and procedures, having oversight, making sure we stay on top of it. Again, we're refining that as we go. And you don't want it to be too specific, but right now they're still just a little too general. We got to find a nice middle ground for that. So we continue working on that. Information and communication, we are in touch with consultants of every type, as sometimes we wish we weren't, but we are in all different areas. We have financial consultants, we have attorneys, we have CFD consultants, anybody. And when there's a new bit of legislation, any new reporting, anything on the horizon, they are sending us notices. This is out here. No, this is coming. This got passed. Now we have to do it. And they're really good about that. There was a new reporting that was required this year for the CFDs at the state level. And I got it mixed up because everything's by numbers. SB 1029, 1367, whatever they are. And I got them mixed up and thought I had stayed on top of one of the filings. Well, I didn't. And so I went back and I said, did I miss one? What is this? And he goes, oh, that's this. I can have it to you in a week. We could, if as long as you authorize it, so we can do it, and then you can send your report. You'll be on time. So, I mean, it was one of those things where I thought I had done it, but I hadn't because I had the wrong number to keep track of them and all of them. So, anything that's new, they're usually really good about staying on it, reminding us, making sure we know. The medical marijuana was a huge one that I know PD's been working on with legal to make sure that what the city of Beaumont does is okay with what the state put in place so that we don't have problems with that. There's just always something. So we're almost inundated with that. The monitoring. The monitoring is something that in a larger company, in a large city, in a county, you'll have an entire staff devoted to nothing but internal audit. They go around the city and they make sure everybody's following procedures and they're making sure that everything is done the right way. We aren't big enough for that. So we don't have an internal audit. What we have is a city council. What we have is a finance committee. We have management with oversight, and we have our outside auditor who comes in. Well, here recently it's been a little more consistent, but it's supposed to only be once a year when they come in and do your financial audit. So we rely on that kind of oversight at this size of the city to do our own monitoring, our own controls, and making sure everything is in place. That pretty much covers the whole rest of this report. The rest of this is just the state controller's report as it was issued with some notations that I made for different things, just so you'd have updates and notes from what we keep track of on our side, which you're welcome to read at any time. The last 2 pages are something I found that I thought would be helpful, although it's maybe a little bit too high a level. KPMG is one of the big CPA firms, and this is from their international group, and it's assessing the system of internal control. Because people wonder, how can we assess the system of internal control? Well, that's what our auditors are doing. That's one of their responsibilities when they're here. They have to assess our internal controls, which is why we get an internal control letter from them. When that's ready to go, when it's drafted, I'll go over it with them. We'll discuss it. Same thing. I have responses for them, and then they come and they talk to you about what it is that's in that letter, what they have in their audit report, so that you know what they've found. The goal usually is that you don't have the same finding repeat itself year after year after year. Sometimes it happens because you have a small staff, so you're always going to have segregation issues, but as long as you've mitigated the best of your ability, you just have to keep saying that. So sometimes that one will repeat. With the city of Beaumont, because we just finished the 2015 year, we're now doing the 2016 year, and the 2017 year is just now ending, we're going to have repeat findings because they come back, and while some of them we've handled because we knew they were already there, when they do testing, they'll find something else because they're looking at it from a different view. Well, they found it with the 15 year. Well, we're already in the 17 year, so I couldn't have corrected it for 16, so it's going to repeat. We're going to see them again. But once we get on a regular annual calendar where we're doing things on a regular basis, no, those things should not repeat. We should not have the same findings year after year.
And you're talking about the annual audit,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is not the, not an ongoing process. This is when they do the.
Right. It's just that they're doing 15, then 16, and then pretty much they're going to turn right around and do 17. So,
Okay.
you know, I like having them around. They hang out. It's all good. This particular newsletter, and a lot of the CPA firms, the national ones, do a lot of newsletters like this, where they have things for board of directors or finance committees, where they talk about the different risks that they see on, international levels or even national levels. This one is very general. It's more about what should the audit committee expect, what should the board expect, what is it we should be looking for, the key questions for audit committees. So they have some here, but a lot of them have to do with utilizing their internal audit function, which we can't do. But it still is very good in knowing what it is that they're looking at. International companies are looking at the same things we are. It's the same things. You don't want to leave people open so that it's easy for them to do the wrong thing. You just have to be diligent, and you have to make sure you have the right people in the right spots to keep oversight over it. And that is really what this is all about. So that was more for your information, that know that there is a ton of materials out there, a ton, that you can look into at any time. And that's really the status of our SEO report. So I don't
Okay,
know.
we're open for questions for
Yes.
Milana on processes, any of the comments that were made by the state, anything, we're open. You want to go ahead? Joan?
I have a question.
Sure.
On number 8, Yes. The specific job description?
Yes.
Is there any place where we can find the job descriptions that were corrected?
I believe there weren't any, and now there are some. So I don't know if they are available on the website, to be honest. I don't know if they are, but I know that there are job descriptions because I went through some of them with HR to make sure that they were accurate as well from the finance point of view on the finance staff. But I
I'd like
don't
to
know
see
if
the
they're
ones.
on the website. They might be.
Is there a way for us to get them?
I'm sure there is. I can talk to Carrie about that and make sure that we get copies of them so that you can see them. If there's any in particular you wanted to see, because there's a ton of
No, just being
positions.
a new member, I'd like to look at, since this is the Finance Non-Committee.
Right.
I'd like to look at the positions that
Okay.
we have in our, Finance
Oh,
Department.
just for the
What those-
finance department? Okay.
Right, and what those responsibilities are, things they should
Sure.
be doing and what the positions are. And then also I noticed there was one that talked about the controls over petty cash. And we said that, sounds like corrected, so it means we must have some
Oh, yeah.
policies and procedures set now. And I'd like to kind of read over those too.
Oh, sure. That one actually is pretty easy. There is only one petty cash box in the city now. I don't know how many there were before, but there is now only one. Petty cash box has, is it $400 in it, I think, at the most at any given time. It is locked in the safe that's in my office. The safe in my office I cannot open. I don't know the combination. The combination requires two people because some people know the first half and some people know the second half. So you always have to have two people to open the safe. It takes the third person to come in, open the petty cash box, which has to be me there. The form gets taken out, the receipts are attached. The director has to have already approved the reimbursement on the form with the receipt attached. It goes onto a log. The log then I sign off on. I double count the payment going out, and then once every 6 months we count all the money and all the receipts and we make sure it balances. So we got that one, and that's all in writing. I have that one. So
I'd like to see it.
you got it. That one I can do. That one I know.
How often are you replenish that?
Actually, it just depends on use. It seems like sometimes we go through more trainings, and so there's more reimbursement of like the $7 parking kind of thing. Or we had a couple of late night meetings with council, so we got a couple of, they were fruit trays or meat and cheese trays. We had them here late, so that, kind of wiped out our petty cash a little quicker. But usually it takes quite a while to go through it. So, yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Sure.
Is there any particular reason, I'm looking at item 5A, particularly where it says there's no credit cards, it's in orange, I don't know if that was specific reasoning for that. But as I'm looking at it, I was kind of curious if there's a written procedure now for vetting out the actual expenditures on pre-approved authorizations that you can make available to us in relation to credit cards. And the follow-up to that would be an exact example of the petty cash thing. Is there are government programs out there for, I'll use my large agency, for example. I have a cow card as an example, and you reconcile that every single month as the end user. Now, I understand you're very short-staffed. Keeping that in mind, the program
Right.
does have, some limitations with
Sure.
it. But you could curtail that use to department heads or very specific people related to that, and it's very controllable. My agency runs through about $1.4 million a year on those, and we authorize that for everything from paying utility bills to exactly what you said, food purchases for specific events. So I was kind of curious if there's any thought been given to that as well.
The city has no credit cards, period. We're turning the corner now, and so that's starting to cause some problems here and there. But some of the credit accounts we do have, we also have controls on. And one was our internal control finding from our auditors. And those of you who've heard this before, the cards we have for fuel, for the buses, for the police officers, the fuel credit cards. I met with all the department heads. We've gone around the tree a couple times now and finally got everybody on the same page. We all understand the policy as it is written. We came up with a user agreement. Every person who has access to the fuel card had to acknowledge and sign that they understand the rules. And we now have all of that in place, and we're waiting for our first statement from the gas company to make sure that the way that we assigned it and the way that we set it up, that when those reports come in, it will be exactly the way we wanted it, so we can do a self-audit, an internal audit from the accounting staff to make sure it looks right. Something looks wrong, then we go back to that director and we ask him what happened. We have that as a credit card. If you want to look at it that way, they can only use
Well,
it
it
at
is.
certain places.
It is.
We have a charge account at Home Depot.
Right.
We have to have the receipt, has to say why, and I'm about to implement, they have to tell me what improvement area it was used in. That one's gonna hurt a little bit, but we'll get through that. What other one? I wanna say we have,
Stater Brothers, I believe that was in your report.
we do not have a Stater Brothers account
I
any
think
longer.
that's a rolling.
That one is gone. The credit card itself that they had for the city, gone. There was, I want to say a Sam's Club, gone. I think there is still one Walmart credit card that's kept in the safe for emergencies if there's a community event and we need something. But I think that covers it. One of the things that I'm hoping, if we can get things turned around, is that we get some kind of credit card for the city that we maintain maybe in the safe just for the finance office to use, because sometimes we have, especially with the police department, they have to go to training and you have to be able to book a hotel, and you can't do that.
Without a credit
That's
card.
right. So we're running into, you know,
Yeah, you don't
some
mail checks
roadblocks.
anymore.
Right. So we're toying with ideas, but we have very strict purchasing rules. The purchasing ordinance is very constraining. I mean, everything that's over $1,000 has to be signed off by the city manager. If it's $10,000 or more, it has to go to council for approval before we can spend it. All the contracts have to go through RFP, they have to be vetted, they have to go through the whole process and then voted by council. So there's not a lot of room for anything else. It's receipts, the budget, and we're getting everyone used to doing a budget. What's it based on? What vendors do you plan to use? And using the purchase order part of the program has been quite a learning experience for most of the directors. They've not had this before.
So at this point, we're pushing everything to the employees back
Yeah,
in order to go to continuing education, or,
at the moment, yeah.
oof.
Yeah, it's a little painful. But for a long time, the city wasn't doing it. Everything just ceased. Well, now that we're starting to,
And what's the turnaround time for them to be reimbursed?
we try to, they get especially for hotel, if they have a quote that says that their hotel rate is this much a night, we would like to give them that money so they can take it with them.
Sure.
So we try and do it a week or two before they leave.
Okay.
There are some where they just present us with the paid invoice after the fact. There are some that can do that, and that's all right. We try and pay them right away, though, as soon as we get the documentation.
Right away being,
Like if they
2
bring me the
weeks,
receipt
a month.
today, I would like to think if we can get everybody to sign off on it, we can have them their check by the end of this week. We do check runs weekly, so
Okay.
we try to do that. But they have to turn in their receipts, and we do have a cutoff time for that. So,
understood.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Yes.
You were pointing out the last 2 pages of your presentation.
John, if you could please use the microphone.
Oh, yeah, you pick up your voice. There you go.
Thank you.
You don't think you can hear me?
I watched the last meeting and I couldn't hear half of what went on, so we really
It's
got
tough. Yeah.
It was horrible. We got to use them.
So, many years ago, what they taught us is that there are some idiosyncrasies between government and nonprofit and businesses. In this particular presentation, did you notice any idiosyncrasies between the way you do the government accounting and the way they wrote the article?
Only in terminology. In general, it should work the same.
Okay.
Other than we don't have a board of directors, we don't have an internal audit function, and some of the for-profit businesses have a different viewpoint than a not-for-profit and certainly a government. The reasoning for these different kinds of businesses being there is a little different, so sometimes the view of it is a little different. In the big companies, it seems like when they're talking about risk assessment, they're talking about, did you follow the accounting standards for measurement? of your revenues, of your assets. Where in a not-for-profit, it's more, have you kept up with the timing of your grants? Did you get everything recognized in the right period based on when you spent it? And for government, it's more, to me, a little bit odd where, like I said, for receivables, it's what did you receive 60 days after year end? The end. It's a little difficult sometimes for me to grasp that. And it's still changing. I mean, the government standards are starting to swing a little bit more towards the private industry reporting. But the international community, I think they're more worried about the reporting standards. But that's about really, that view is the only thing that's really different.
The next report that you'll be able to spit out, will we have that for next month's meeting?
It depends on when we have next month's meeting.
Well, that's true.
A loaded question with a
think
loaded answer.
We're gonna talk about that.
If we have the next meeting in August, then absolutely, you will have
The
that.
first Monday in August.
Yes,
we
you will
would
have the report. And my thinking was that once we get on a regular monthly process, the audit committee will get a report with more detail at that meeting because the month won't have closed yet, but hopefully, we'll still have some good detail to look at maybe the month before that, so we'll be off a little bit. Then that same report, it may be a little bit higher level, then would be what I give to council because I plan on giving them a report their second meeting each month. That's kind of what I'm doing in my head. See how that works. So.
One of the things about internal controls, which is what most of the state controller's report was really focusing on, is that there should be a systematic review process. So this is, for me anyways, it's been very good today to get the update. But I'd like to get a review and an update on a regular basis. It's not something we need every month or whatever, but maybe either once a quarter or twice a year to basically go through internal controls and tell us what's been refined, what's been changed, where you've made improvements so that we don't end up getting lazy about monitoring it and giving you input wherever we can.
Sure.
I don't know what anybody else's thoughts are on that, but it seems to me that would
I agree, and
be good for discussion.
what I would like to see us as a committee do is go through what we feel we need to be looking at on a regular basis in order to satisfy the states wanting us to have an audit committee. And as an audit committee, how often do we want to look at certain things and exactly what we'd want to look at? I think that would be a very good discussion for us and get that into some type of a routine.
We could do that. We could do some kind of like an expectation, what the committee would want to see. My biggest focus has been to try and get these financial reports.
Right.
So once
And
we're
we
got
understand
that
that.
online,
Yeah.
then when we got the internal control letter from the auditors, we talked quite a bit about that vehicle fuel use card, which it took a while to get everybody, but we got that. I think we got it solved. I think we're in good shape. So we need to just start, starting attacking all of those controls that they found that were lacking so that we can get them all fixed to make sure that we really are going through them. But absolutely. In fact, what we could do next time is maybe bring the auditor's internal control report back and look at what they had in their findings. I know a lot of them we had already fixed, but like the one for the vehicle, I can bring back what the final policy was, although it didn't change a lot from the one we discussed, and then what we came up with for the user agreement. We can bring that template in, something like that.
I think that's what we're trying to accomplish, is to get completely through the auditor's report and know that we've addressed everything in that report. And like you said earlier, we've got a lot of more policy type of stuff that's a little harder to really break down and say, this is exactly what they were asking us to do, but there was a lot in there that I'd like to just be sure that we're covering, and we've addressed all of that.
Absolutely.
This is not a complete call, this is what the committee did, right? The
No,
subcommittee?
this is
Or
right
is
out of
this
the state
actual?
controller's report.
This is the actual, okay, all right.
I started to use the checklist, but it didn't have everything, and then I thought, well, then I started trying to build it, and then I thought, no, this is gonna take me too long, so I just took the report and just used it in general.
And made your notes there, okay.
I just want to say, I totally agree with both you ladies. That's where I kind of started with reading policies and procedures. I think that's a start,
Okay.
for me at least, to get, what we've corrected, look at what our city's policies and procedures are to understand what we should be doing, and then look at it to see if we're really doing it. And for me, I have a policy procedure background, so that's usually where I kind of start. It's the policies and procedures first, and then break it down to individual responsibilities and positions, and see what those positions should be doing, and then we go from there.
Sure. Have you seen a copy of the policies and procedures that we did finally get put in place more recently? There were some original ones, but we've refined them again. We can get you a copy of that too, so you can see where we're at. When I say they're a little broad, they're a little bit general, and we're just, as we change things around, we're able to.
That's fine. I would love to read it, even the ones
sure.
with the administration, because to me, that'll give me a lot of background for, what we're looking into.
Sure. We can definitely do that.
It seems that a lot of their findings refer to correcting or putting a policies and procedure in as a control. I think if everybody agrees, it might be a wise idea to look at those policies and procedures that would put in and have a buy-off of the committee and roll that up to the city council to say, yeah, we agree. This is what we've done. That has been done. Okay.
We did do that.
Is that something that
I don't
Ms. Roberts and I could
Absolutely.
see?
We'll make sure that we distribute that policy out, but that is something that we did.
Well, and I think you've probably updated it some since we went through that. That was,
Informally, a lot of it in my head, because I haven't had
but
time.
I don't think it would be a bad thing to just bring it back next meeting, and that could be part of what we're going through.
We can do that.
See if we still, based on the audit report, do we still need to update some of this or that and go through that?
I think we still have a lot of room for improvement. Like I said, the structure of our policies and procedures we're really into the second step of it, but we need to get down to step 15, step 16.
Okay.
So, and it's getting there. It's just going to take a little time.
Okay. Anything else?
So it sounds to me like you've taken and put on the program. It sounds to me that you put on the program that we will have a meeting in July.
No, August. I think that's where we're headed, only because we have 4th of July holiday at the beginning of the month, and we're reviewing everything so late this month that it looked like it would make more sense to bring it back the first Monday in August. But we'll get to that agenda item in just a little bit.
Hi.
Hi.
I was looking at item number 4 as far as the award of contracts.
Yes.
Is there a very detailed policy and a procedure in place now, or is that still being developed?
Oh, no, it's very detailed. We have getting older is really starting to get on my nerves, because words are there and then they're gone. We have an ordinance, there we go. We have a very detailed ordinance on what we can and cannot do, what we need to do for professional versus a construction contract, the RFP process, approval process, all of that. And so that all got documented and then put into an ordinance to follow.
Now, with regards to the construction contracts, for instance, does the city sign vendor contracts, or does the city issue its own contract for vendors to sign?
It's our contract that legal has already blessed that we can then use, and the vendors sign.
Are there controls in there as far as establishing guidelines for markup, profit, and things of that nature with regards to change orders and fixed costs for labor classifications and things that are awarded?
When we bring the awards to council for approval, they're supposed to, and I've seen it, that they're supposed to have in there about change orders. Change orders may not exceed 5%, change orders may not exceed 10%, whatever. So it's all in there depending on what the project is, because different things have different requirements. But yes, it's all in there.
Now, when I was kind of briefly reviewing the process that was listed here, is the qualification of the invited bidders established before award as part of the solicitation effort? Or is it only done after the fact that bids are received as part of the qualification of the bid? I mean, do we preview or pre-qualify who we solicit RFPs from ahead of time?
No, what we do is we have it, I can't remember the name of the website, but we have a process. When we have an RFP that has been approved by council, we put it out. We can send it to individual vendors if we have some in mind. Sometimes there's a limited number of people that'll do it. But there's also a website that we've begun using, and I want to say the county uses it, and you put the RFP out there and you can see how many people are looking at your RFP, so you can determine the kind of the range of the different quality contracts or bids that come in, and then we evaluate them. So we don't limit anything. Generally, we're looking for the lowest qualified bid. Just depends on what's out there, but we've been using that. We've been getting great success using that website. Just putting it on our website wasn't getting us very much as far as, somebody responding, which, totally understandable. But we started using this other procurement site that the county uses, and it's been great.
They're basically general RFPs issued out for respondents to respond to, not specifically issued to certain vendors.
Right, no, it's a general process.
And you might want to, since we're on the topic, explain what you do when the RFP closes, what process you go through when it closes. Just a snapshot.
Just a snapshot.
So it ties it up.
It does. We try to put together a scoring committee of staff. And so once you have your scoring committee, they take the bidders that they look at and they score the responses. There's a list of items that they have to score. Then you total them all up. You figure out the average. You get your top 3 or 4 or 5, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Then we'll have a phone interview process, the same committee members, where they ask questions. They get scored again. Then we will have a meeting. The committee will have a meeting. We'll talk about what we did like, what we didn't like, if there was anything that we thought should be considered special. We come up with our recommendations and we send it then to council, and then council then will select one of the top 3. Usually we'll recommend one over another. Occasionally it's just pick one. They're all kind of the same, but usually there's at least one that stands out. But it's all goes right through the process.
Are the design consultants for, let's say, construction contract awards, are the design consultants that are contracted separately part of that review process?
Yes. Yeah. Unless it's part of a larger contract and the contractor did that as a sub underneath them, then that may be a little bit different. I try to stay out of the construction contracts as much as I can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is it possible to get an org chart for the finance department?
Yes, it's really easy. It's 1, 2, and 3.
We had an official
There's
work chart
one's right there.
online, but they're working on updating it, and there's new hires coming in, so it's not put back on our website yet.
But we do have an org chart citywide that was with our budget that we just approved, and so we do have that. It's that'll give you everything. So, but I think finance is just a box. I don't recall us having everybody listed there, but yes, we do have. We have some structure, so I haven't drawn it up.
And I just want to add one detail. We do have the treasurer also serves as checks and balances after finance is done with it, on warrants and anything actually the treasurer wants to know about.
Sure.
The treasurer is able to verify the warrants, talk with finance staff about any questions, and the treasurer signs it.
Right, and that's every week because we do our check runs every week. So for sure, treasurer comes in once a week. She gets to look at all of the backup, the invoices, the reports. We mail out no checks until she's been through that list and has signed off on it. And she's doing great because she caught one of our miscodings in this last group. And we all looked at it, and none of us caught it, but she did. So, that process does work. But doing it weekly really helps. Because I think they were trying to do it, every other week or twice a month? It's too much. It's too much to look at. That'd be crazy. So, yeah, doing it weekly on a regular basis has helped a great deal. And then those are always given to council, those packets that we call the warrants, which is all the checks that were written for that week.
Okay, if that's all the questions.
I'm always available if you have any others, so.
Thank you, Milana.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're going to have the discussion on audit. Okay. Let's move on to number 4, the discussion to cancel July's meeting and resume in August. And I kind of gave you the background on that. We're so late in the month this month. We've got 4th of July holiday. So we thought it might just make better sense if we take this into the first Monday in August. Calendar handy?
Well,
I
I'm
think it was
gonna
the
look
8th,
it up
wasn't
right
it?
now.
I think it was 7th or the 8th.
Okay.
7th.
7th?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion on?
I make a motion that we hold our next meeting on August 7th and that we do not meet in July.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good on August 7th. Okay, number 5, finance and audit update. I would like to start, and then we can talk about this a little bit. I would like to start by introducing our new members. We have 2 new members, and we have 2 alternates. Joanne Roberts. Right. Joanne Roberts, like stuck there for a second. Joanne Roberts is a new member, and Steve Cooley is a new member. Steve Martino, I believe you were first alternate, Steve? First alternate, okay. And John Chamberlain,
Yes, ma'am.
correct?
Yes.
Second alternate, okay. We welcome you. Thank you for you coming aboard. We have a full committee now with you guys joining us, so we're very happy about that. Steve, did Nicole get your correct email address?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, I'll get that from her.
Got 2 now.
Okay, good. Yeah, it kept bouncing back to us, so, okay, thank you. And then, because the audio was so bad on last month's meeting, I completely missed what the discussion was on doing the finance and audit update. Can somebody give me a recap on what this item is for? I mean, obviously a standing item on the city council agenda, but I don't know what the purpose of this is.
It was a little confusing. I believe that the intent was so that the committee had the opportunity to talk about things related to city council, and so that there would be communication between the two, or make sure that everyone was on the same page. Is that what you remember?
Well,
Because it had to do with city council wanting to make sure that the committee was staying up to date, or...
is this what we were going to give the treasurer for an update to council?
Maybe.
That was my impression,
Was it, John?
yes. And that was to take and answer questions that they have of us, and for us to get an opportunity to ask them questions that we have, so we can function more fully.
Okay, my only concern about having something like this on the agenda is that under the Brown Act, we have to be very specific about the topics that we discuss. It's not kind of like a free-for-all on bringing anything in, because we have to allow the public to give their input and feedback on any of our agenda items. So I just wanted to be very cautious in how we're structuring that.
It was my understanding that it was pretty much what John said. It wasn't that council items were going to come to us in some sort of a way that would violate the Brown Act, where we just sort of start talking about stuff. It was my understanding from this item, everybody correct me if that's not what you understood, was that where we could improve the link of information that went to council on what happened in this meeting.
Perfect.
So there is no potential risk for violation there, I do not believe. So if we don't report to council, we, and Mike jump in and clarify if you have any other understanding. If we don't report to council, we serve basically as a committee that is supposed to get into the detail more on financial issues than they can at council. So that would mean that we should be reporting back to council on what happened in the meeting, what was generally discussed, and any issue that we want council to be aware of. So there's just a couple of things that need to go back to council every 2 weeks at a council meeting to just let council know how their service committee did for them and what they did for them. And it could be very brief, it could be more detailed, whatever needs to happen. I don't think anybody meant for it to become a big cumbersome process, but we don't want to fall down on that communicating back to council.
Right, because we only have that once a month opportunity to give feedback.
Right.
So that makes perfect sense. Okay.
Is that what you understood, Mike?
Yes, and then if there were items that council wanted finance, not a committee, to look into, they could give it back to the treasurer who was filing the report, similar to what John was saying. And so there's a two-way communication, but that information will be placed on an agenda. Perfect. So that we could be discussed.
Great.
In open session.
Okay, thank you.
So, and it was my understanding that we were thinking the treasurer would do that as the liaison back and forth to council.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay. You okay with that, Sharon?
Yeah, it's part of the treasurer's report.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. I like seeing that continue. I think that worked really well with the treasurer doing the treasurer's update at the council meetings and then including our stuff within that. I think that worked really, really well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just looking through my notes. I think that's it. Okay, so we had staff updates.
I know that Todd was hoping to make it back because he said he wanted to talk about a few things. I'm just not certain what those were.
Okay.
So I'm not sure.
Put it on the agenda for next week.
Yeah, and then we'll get to that so we make sure that you know. I want to say it had something to do with the refundings of the CFDs or maybe something like that he was looking at, that he thought we should make sure the finance committee was aware of, but I'm not 100% sure what he had in mind. So I don't know if there are questions about anything that anyone would want to ask that maybe I would have the answer to. Just in general?
Yeah, I think I'm good on everything I had on my notes.
Okay.
So I think all we need to do is just look at the roundup items then on what we want to go back for Sharon to take back to council. And I think pretty brief, just going through the report for Milana. Anything else? recap of our meeting today?
Yeah, and that we're expecting financial reports from Milano.
For August meeting?
And
That'll be our look at our first one.
now we didn't discuss when we wanted to look at the internal controls progress. You want to put that on the agenda for next time?
I'd like to put that on the agenda for next
Okay.
time. And talk
Good.
about our process for,
I think that's good.
is that good? Okay, good. Okay. Now, I remember looking back, Ray, you were, you had spoke specifically on one of the reports that you would want to see that Milana was going to be able to,
Actually, talking about the financial report and the balance sheet, I like to see that. I mean, I'm more on that side. Yeah. And then to follow up what Nancy's saying about the report, that would be nice to see quarterly on that. So we could really analyze and help each other in here to understand, you know, your policy and procedures on that side. Thank you.
I know when we went through like the draft of what some of the reports could look
Right.
like, you know, I wrote all the stuff
Yeah.
on the board. Would it be helpful if I like put that in some kind of written document, like how I grouped things so that it'll make sense in the reports? Because I can do that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
well, I don't want to add a whole lot to your day, because I know you're you know, kind of swamped with projects. I
Yes.
don't know if it would be better for us to look at a report and then, at that point,
I'm just not sure if it may help to have that structure, even if
Yeah.
it's just a
To know what's on it.
generalized,
Yeah,
okay?
that's the thing that she's talking about. I mean, the detail and also the summary, I mean, that'll be great.
Mhm.
You see, we know the flow, where you're coming from.
Right,
That'd be
okay.
great.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Kind of,
Yeah, because
Snapshot.
anything anyway is all integrated in there and everything, right?
right,
So,
okay. All right.
I have a question for the committee. Is there a way for, like, being a new committee member, for me to get more background on the city's processes? Because I'd like to know, you know, what our role is when I look at the state's findings, you know, with these findings that we have as a committee, you know, what is our role or responsibility as far as reporting back to city council and here? I mean, it sounds like, you know, we have shortened staff and they're doing a lot, but, you know, for me, what is there where I can look at and get some background on exactly, you know, where we are here with the city processes? Or did we do maybe a walking tour through things and look at some of the processes?
I would like
Milana
the same
has-
thing.
Milana has been working on those processes for over a year now.
almost.
Just a little bit. I'm sure you know do you know the background with the city as far as the ousted council? and-
From what I've read.
Okay,
you know,
so we
but that's
had
just, that's newspaper and that's media.
Okay. Milano stepped into a very messy situation. She had to go through and basically organize all of the accounts. There was, like she was saying, there's, you know, receipts here, no receipts, and she's been reconciling everything for over a year now, putting everything into order. So this report that we're talking about, that was April meeting, I think it was, that we actually got to see. We changed we got a better accounting software system, and so now we have. She brought us in draft reports that can be pulled. So we were looking at what types of reports are available for us and what we would think is most important that we look at on some quarterly, semi-monthly, every month type of basis. So we'll be seeing our very first one come August of actual numbers, right? Okay.
Because what they had before when I got here is every department had their own software. They did their own thing, and no one had access to the accounting program except for the 3 people in finance. There were no other logins. It wasn't shared information. So what would happen is this department would do their thing, then finance would take the reports, re-input it. They would take cash receipts at the counter, print reports, finance had to re-enter it. Everything was segregated. Nothing was integrated at all. So everything was being entered over and over and over and over. Sometimes right, sometimes not right, and the further we got into it, the more we found wasn't right. We've changed the software programs. December is when we went live with the general ledger. In March, we went live with the first step of the conversion of our cash receipt system, and we are currently in the testing phase of the new system for building, planning, permits, public works, all of the things that they do with construction and permits that they issue. So those are all being tested now so that when things occur, when a cash receipt is done, when a deposit is taken from someone that's building a home or a patio cover, whatever that is, that it's not being entered 3, 4 different times, but that the systems can run together. And that's why some of our policies and procedures haven't been written, is because we're still putting these softwares together so that we can take away the very large labor-intensive process that they had and bring everybody together so that we can work together towards getting the city back on solid footing. You can't expect people to know how their department is doing if they're never given financial information. They need to be able to look at those results. So they're now, this year, able to, and this year meaning 2017, they've been able to log on. Any of the directors can log into the accounting program. They have access. They can see actual results against their budget, which is also input. They can see what they have in purchase orders. They can see how close they are to purchase orders that they have for some of their general purchasing. Blankets, that's what those are called, blanket purchase orders, so they know if they're coming to the end where they're like, I either have to get more or I have to stop doing business with this company, whatever that may be. They can see where they stand right now close to year end to make sure that they don't go over budget. This has all been a learning curve for everyone. And as we get everyone on board and educate everyone, those process and procedures will make more sense, and we'll be able to point to specific indicators and be able to refine a lot of it. But a lot of it right now is still just in learning curve, which is a little tough for some. But we're getting there. We're getting there.
I think one thing that might be very helpful is to go back and watch the YouTube videos on our meetings. We only meet once a month, so you could go back 6 months, that's only 6 meetings. And our meetings last from 6 to 8, and we're usually pretty good about getting out at 8 o'clock. There's been, talking to the microphone. I'm sorry. I talk so loud that I expect everybody to hear me. But there's been a couple of, we had the CFD meeting that was, on our bonds and that type of thing. There's been, we've had the budget meeting.
Mm-hmm. We've had the auditors.
They had the auditors in. Mm-hmm. So there's quite a bit of information in there that you could really catch up with quickly by going through. And then each one of the agendas and the documentation for the meeting is online, so you can pull it up just like we pulled up this evening's meeting. So you can go back through all of that, and I think that'll give you a head start for our August meeting, and then go from there.
Maybe after I read up, but I still think I would like, I know you're really busy, maybe at some point in the future, an opportunity to come in and have maybe just a walkthrough.
Oh, sure.
It was up to your time and just kind of explain, just walk through the procedures of where you are now and what you're doing. I think that'll help a lot with just, knowing what we're doing now. I mean, I can read what happened in the past, and that's kind of said and done, but, where we're going in the future, and the fact that, we have these findings where we need to improve policies and procedures, and if I'm seeing what the procedures are now and reading in the future what we've written, it'll give me a good idea of where we are.
Right, the abilities that we now have that we didn't have.
Exactly.
It's almost like in July of 2015, somewhere right in there, the city started with a completely clean slate because there was nothing. There was nothing. So anything that's been done since then has been built on from that point. And like I said, we're only like at step 2. We need to be at 15, 16, moving along, and we will. As we get things handled and taken care of so we can move forward, we'll be able to make progress a little faster, so.
That's great. I mean, and we're step 2, and, as a
getting
committee
there.
member, we'll grow with you until we get to step 15.
Absolutely.
We'll actually have a really good understanding of where we're going, what the processes are, and, we were here, and now we're here, what the improvements we've made.
Right, absolutely.
I just wanted to mention, Joanne, if we couldn't get together as a group and go through City Hall and look at procedures, if you want to, because it would be a Brown Act violation,
Right.
unless we posted that as a meeting and we did that as a whole meeting, and that would be probably pretty disruptive to staff. So if you want to know more about the procedures, I just don't want you to think that we're not jumping on that and saying, yeah, let's all do a walkthrough, because that would be
It's a meeting.
Brown Act issue for us. So, but by all means. And then I don't know if the new members are familiar with the transparency portal, but the transparency portal was one of the things that was instituted when all of the changes came in, so that if you wanted to go back and look up some specific document, you could always be able to do that without having to go through a cumbersome process of asking for a document that maybe we had reviewed before. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that. And if it's helpful, there's an ordinance for the committee, what the committee was set up to do. And, if it's helpful, you can look that up on the transparency portal also, so that might be a little bit of glue for you as to where we hope to serve the council.
And I think that's, with us having the discussion on our next meeting about what we want to do to audit, because we're not an auditing company and auditing books. We have professionals that do that. What we're doing is looking at the audit of the process. Todd just walked in. Did you have something important you wanted to say to us tonight?
Because we just got through staff report, and I said I thought you wanted to say something, but I didn't know what.
You're good?
We're good.
Next month?
There you go.
He looks tired.
It's a long
Next
Monday.
month.
Not next month.
Not next month.
August.
August 7th.
Speaking back to her question, do you think it would be good to take and explain to the new committee members that this was not something that was totally done by Milani, the SDO report? This was something that we were trying to work on as a committee. There was a subcommittee formed that worked with her so that they understand a little better why the report was done and how the methodology to get where we are now.
Yeah, and that subcommittee still stands. We haven't decided to get rid of that yet. So we have one member that needs 2 members.
We have
We need
2 members left.
We need 2 new members on that subcommittee. But Nancy can give you great background on that.
Well, the state controller's office came in, they issued their report, they gave a window, which they always do, for staff to respond. And the audit committee, the finance and audit committee, was formed and actually was in process before the state controller's office came in. And so then the committee felt it was their responsibility to track what the state controller's office found, what we're doing to address it. So we did a subcommittee that worked to develop a checklist, to look at the report and to make a checklist Now, there's no requirement for cities to do that, but that was our way of making sure that everything that was in the state controller's report was looked at, segregated, defined, and then addressed. And we expected to be able to say completed on every item that was appropriate, or say why it wasn't, or be able to ask staff where we were in the progress for that. And that's what the state controller's office checklist was designed to do. And it was designed by this committee. And it was to where the rubber meets the road, to really say, are we actually doing the internal controls? Are we doing the policies? Are we doing job descriptions? Are we doing... So all of those checklist items came out of being proactive about addressing what the state controller's office said in their report that we needed to do.
And what I presented tonight is not that checklist. That checklist, like I said, it wasn't absolutely complete. And when I started to try and fill it in, I just knew it would take longer. So I just took the actual report from the SEO and just made notations and did it that way. But the checklist is very thorough. It just doesn't, it hasn't hit everything yet. It isn't complete, so.
So you have tonight, Milana did make a copy of the SEO's findings, and then
And next meeting, I will bring
We have
the
a
fiscal
checklist?
15 auditors' internal control findings, and we can talk about those that are a little more specific, because what
Okay.
the state did really was take their entire checklist and turned it into a report, the whole thing. There you go.
okay.
But we'll get into things that are a little more specific as we go forward, and we can also readdress that checklist and bring that up and see if we want to try and complete that.
Yes.
It's a daunting task, but I don't know if we want to try and address that part or not.
Anything else?
Are we talking about future agenda items?
What I have for future agenda is the, our first report coming through from Milana on the, do you remember which one it was? Do you know what the name of it was, the one we were talking about with Ray?
There were so many, but I kept them, and I was making notes that night.
Okay.
So I'll go back and make sure that I pull the right ones. And the more I use the software, there's more reports, and I've learned how to maneuver things so I can
Okay.
get just what it is I want broken down the way that makes most sense. So I'm trying to
Okay.
find a way to come up with a report that isn't this big, so we'll be able to review it without
Yeah.
getting bogged down in the details. So
I think we could start off with the
you want the book?
one.
Oh.
The one report. I think
can
we
do that.
came up with a report that we all
There was
felt
one.
was going to be one we wanted to look at.
Right,
Okay.
there was one.
Okay. All right, so we're going to do that. We've got that report coming back. We're going to discuss the audit process that the committee will be, what we feel is important on the committee to be involved with that audit process.
Is that an audit process with the
It's
auditors?
reviewing internal controls.
There you go.
They're reviewing the internal controls progress.
Okay.
So it wasn't really an audit. I just don't want to be misleading in that. Would you agree with that, Milana? Is that a better way to put it? We're going to discuss how often we want to review the internal controls with
Right.
you and the progress.
We can get into it a little bit more of the specifics, more detail. Like I said, the fiscal 15 internal control report will give us a little more too.
Right.
We can look at that and then say, okay, by the next meeting or in 2 meetings, we want to be able to say we've addressed this specific thing. We'd like to be able to review the information flow or the internal control flow or something, pick something and.
I just want to be careful using the audit word because we're not going to be auditing it
No.
per se.
Oversight.
And we're going to do the oversight, and I don't want the public to get confused and think that we're
auditing.
gonna review what the auditors are currently working on or
Right, no,
whatever.
Not on that.
So-
We can, but we can
Okay.
review what they have issued, so that we can do.
Would it be more appropriate to refer that as a performance audit?
Well, I don't know who would be
I mean, if we're trying to
conducting.
distinguish it for the public who's not familiar with the technical terms, because that's more what it would be as a performance audit versus a financial audit.
It is, but we're still not, the
We're not
committee
auditors.
wouldn't be doing the procedures then that would underlie a
Correct.
performance audit, so I'm not.
Correct.
That's why I was thinking more of a oversight,
Yeah.
kind of it's an oversight function where we talk about specifics and then look for improvements. Because it's gonna be documentation, what makes sense, what can we do, what can't we do.
Being there was sort of to add to the check and balances because the council looked at committee members as having some kind of knowledge about what an audit is, and that hopefully some of those questions would be ironed out before the audit actually went to the council for them to bless or to ask questions of, because I realize you're on the council, but you spend a lot of time on audits when it comes to your department and how they relate to the thing. So you would have knowledge on that. Nancy has a background in accounting, and Mr. Santos has a background in accounting. So using those as examples, but not knowing all of the city council members, but hearing some of the discussion that goes on, they're not accountants or don't really get necessarily into accounting issues.
Right, which is why now that I'll be able to present financial reports consistently, we can now look at things. You'll have a better idea of what your oversight is. You can look at specific things, wonder why certain things have relationships that they do, or why something may have changed or not be there, missing. And having those reports is really a humongous step in that oversight function. It's very hard to have oversight when you don't see anything. So knowing that I'm right there, so we actually will have meaningful financial reports that we can discuss, and they'll be useful and they'll be accurate, is huge. And that really will change, I think, some of the focus of the committee, because some of those details won't go to council. You're right. They're looking at the committee to understand that.
So they would take feedback from the finance committee on those audits so that they don't have to get into the weeds, but the finance committee gets into the weeds on that.
Right.
So when can we expect to meet with the auditors? Are we going to actually meeting with the auditors?
Oh, yes, the committee meets with the auditors when they've completed their procedures, when they've drafted their report, which they did when they finished the fiscal 14-15, they met with the committee. When they've completed fiscal 15-16, when they have those drafted, they'll meet with the committee, and then again, when they finish 16-17, which will be right after that one, then they'll meet with the committee. So when they have them drafted,
What do you
then
expect that will be for the?
I don't have the answer for that right now. I know that the 15-16 is in process. They've already been here twice. They are planning on coming back again to do some more testing so that they can start putting their files together. So I would hope not too far into the future. The quicker the better, as far as I'm concerned, since we're going to have to turn around and do it again in a couple months. So it would be
Yeah.
nice.
Well, the last time you talked to us, I thought I heard you say something about there was a legal issue that has to be resolved or qualified in order for them to finish their audit.
No, I know that we've had a lot of litigation that has been resolved, and so we have to sit and go through those to make sure that the accounting of those are properly stated in the financial statements and in those disclosures, because they're significant. And I know that we have not sat down and gone through the two big settlement agreements that we have to do for those disclosures. That has not occurred yet, but I know that they're almost done with the rest of the testing they were going to do. So we still have to do that.
The one thing I was thinking that was outstanding is the possible recoveries of funds depending on the litigation that's going on with certain officials.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do on that. That can't be accrued and it can't be disclosed because it's not, there's a level of requirement in audit in order for those to be included in the disclosures, and it doesn't meet the qualifications, so that will not be in the audit.
Okay, that's way off topic for us on our agenda. So if anybody doesn't have anything else, are you good with what we're feedback?
Yeah, I'm fine. I was just wondering if it's appropriate for us to ask that the consultants that are doing the salary reviews for the city, if they could come and meet with us and tell us how they do that process.
The actual process of how they do the comparison?
The salary
ranges?
review.
The
because-
salary, because we're having a salary and comp, class and comp study, there we go. And they haven't begun the study yet, have they? So I thought the kickoff was this week, so they haven't done anything yet. We just awarded that contract, so.
But it's about a 6-week, was it a 6-week review about?
I'm trying to stay out of it, so I don't. You have to talk into the
I mean, I think
microphone. I'm gonna make him use the microphone.
Yeah, we're trying to look at our agenda items for next time, but that doesn't look like August is a good time for that item.
Right.
It's too new.
Right, and the first step in that process is to establish benchmark communities to be able to survey. So they're going to look at all job descriptions, and then they're going to compare those. And then council will be the body that will ultimately approve the benchmark communities used to evaluate our positions. And so I think what's requested here is, do y'all want to have a presentation or a discussion to review that process?
Right, with the consultants as to how they conduct the process and.
Maybe it would be during a staff update, because we've put you on the agenda on a regular basis. So maybe in the staff update, you could bring us along as to just where that is. And you could speak to what they're looking at generally and the process. And maybe that would suffice. And then if we need something more for you to answer questions, you could go check on it for us. Would that work?
Yes, and I think that when you look at a class and compensation program, that there are long-term financial implications to the city, because those pay scales have to be updated. They should be considered routinely, and we don't want to be too aggressive. We don't want to be too non-aggressive, as trying to find the right spot. So, definitely there's a balance to it, and there's an art to it to make sure it's right for this community. And so, absolutely so. Be happy to visit with the consultants and to get updates from them that we can then present back and keep y'all in the loop as we proceed on that as well.
The question I would have is, I think it's a good topic, but is it under the purview of this committee, and how far do we go when we look at that issue? Because I can see where this could develop into a position where we would be maybe looking at management issues, and I don't think of our committee as being involved with management issues. We're more involved in just the process. And I don't think we would get into the point of trying to say that the recommendations that they're making are...
I wouldn't see that as something we would do. I think it's nice to know what the process is.
Yeah, I understand.
Right?
Yeah.
As an update to the staff report, I think would be sufficient.
Sure.
I mean, unless council came back and told us they wanted us involved, I don't think that that's something that we would get involved in.
And if during your update, if there's something that we have of concern, so by all means, Sharon, when he gets to updating us, if you have specific questions, then, Todd could, if he knows the answer, or he could get the answer. And if there's any concern, then we would take it from there. But at this point, it doesn't, it seems like it could be included in the staff update, unless anybody feels differently about it.
What's the actual name of that?
It's a class and compensation study, classification and compensation study.
Classification and compensation.
We refer to it as a class and comp study.
Thank you.
I think one thing that would be beneficial to this group is we're working out we're reviewing the language and the processes, is maybe to grab a couple of the more complex issues that the city possibly is engaged in, whether it be a contractual obligation or something along those lines, and actually bring it back and take a look at it and see if the actual processes that are built, like you said, we're on step 2 of 15 potentially, and see if it flows, see if it makes sense, see if we need to add other systems of checks and balances in that would maybe correct an action. I mean, I heard earlier $1,000 has to be approved by so-and-so, $10,000 has to be approved by so-and-so, so maybe just a spot check periodically of those items and just flush it through here real quick. It shouldn't take very long once you get it up and running, just to validate it, and just a quality assurance, if you will. It's not an audit, but just something to, just to make sure it's still valid.
That's what I'd kind of like to talk about with our next meeting, is
Sure.
what is those things that we want to
Sure.
take a look at, and
Right.
how regularly do we want to do it, quarterly, semi-annually, whatever. So I think that's just all good discussion. Anything else? I think that's a good meeting for August. Okay, we will, let's see, we did our next meeting is at August 7th.
Yes.
And if there's nothing else, I'll adjourn the meeting at 8:02.